Good morning, everybody. Just a quick hello. We're just waiting for two more panelists, and then we will start. So thanks for being on time to those that are are already here. But just yeah, just a couple more minutes, and then hopefully we can start. So good morning again. Welcome to the Sustainable Transport Festival. So just before we start, we're still waiting for one more panelist, and then we can kick off. But as we're waiting, I'm just thinking if everyone can write in the chat their name. Just introduce yourself, your name, and the organization that you're working with or representing today. While we're waiting for the last panelist. Thank you. Okay, so I think let's just get started. Hopefully he joins soon, and he'll meet us on the way. So this is being recorded, so I think let's start. We can always people can always watch it later as well. So yes, welcome to the Sustainable Transport Festival. My name is Olamide Ejo, and I'm the Executive Director of Lagos Urban Development Initiative. And I'm truly excited to launch this festival. This is the first one, though we've done a variety of things over the years with a good amount of partners, which I will also thank very soon. We have really tried to launch something that's quite exciting and engaging along the lines of transport and sustainable transportation, especially looking at NMT as well. So the festival, just talk a little bit about the festival and of course how you can engage over the next couple of days. So you can go to the next slide, please. Can we go to the next? Yep, fantastic. Thank you. So yeah, so as you know, I think everyone knows the state of Lagos transportation. There are over 1 million registered cars, but of course, not everyone owns a vehicle. And walking and public transport is the main mode of transportation in Lagos. However, it is inadequate. And all residents are exposed to dangerous levels of air pollution from motor vehicles. And of course, we face the Lagos traffic regularly, and it has been described as a nightmare. People are spending from anything from 2 to 8 hours daily as they commute to and from work on a regular basis. And so, we really wanted to push this festival as a way to start discussing how can we move away from the current, transport infrastructure or public transport system and move to something that is, of course, a lot more sustainable. So next slide, please. Oh, we've missed a slide. Yeah. So about the festival. So sustainable transport cannot be cut out from the fabric of urban development. It gives us access to good services, opportunities, businesses, hospitality, healthcare, and it's essential for the economy and the social development of our city, of our state. And so, of course, we want to raise awareness of the need for more sustainable modes of transportation, like walking, cycling, and sustainable public transport. And so a group of CSOs have come together to organize this initiative called the Sustainable Transport Festival. And as I mentioned earlier, we've done a variety of work, projects with a variety of different organizations, psychology, African Cycling Foundation, ITDP, variety of different organizations, as government agencies such as Lamata, Ministry of Transport, and of course CSOs as well. And I think over the years, we've come to understand that it's important for us to raise more awareness and also advocate for this idea of sustainable transportation. So the next couple of days, we'll be having the festival. The first day is today, which starts with these online discussions. There are 3, and this is the first of the 3. Then we'll go to day 2, where we'll be working on a walkability assessment. And it's really here we're using the ITDP toolkit, but we're really trying to understand how do people walk. So we've done 4 already this year. And this will be the last one we'll do this year as part of the festival. And we've really started to understand where we're lacking. But I think what is great about the walkability assessment is that anybody can do it. It shouldn't just be left to CSOs, but individuals can go out and really assess what's happening in the community, what infrastructure they're lacking, and really try to start to advocate and drive a change and drive policy as well. And then we have day 3. Which will be a film and open mic night or evening, and that will happen on Friday at Unicon House. And here, we're really trying to engage, especially young people, but of course everybody is welcome. We really want to kind of celebrate what people are already doing, whether it's government or whether it's CSO organizations. But also kind of show the issues and show what's, where we're lacking and what we can improve. And then the last day, we'll have a bike ride, which is being organized by psychology. But we're hoping that, all biking organizations, as well as individuals, come join us in solidarity to kind of really push the idea of, us cyclists on the street on a regular basis. So I will just talk a little bit about today's conversation or today's conversations. So the first one, which is the one that you're in now, is titled "After the NMT Policy, What Next?" And it's really talking about. I'm hoping everybody here knows that we have a draft NMT policy, but we've had it for, I don't know, maybe 5, 6 years now, but I'm sure the panelists will correct me if I'm wrong. It's what happens now. What do we do now? We've had this draft policy. Where is it going? Where can it take us? And so we're really excited to have that discussion. And then after that, at 12 o'clock, we'll have another panel discussion around public transportation and NMT and how can it really address climate change and air quality. And this is a really great one because it really kind of brings the idea of health into the discussion. Because that's transportation isn't something that stands alone. It really is kind of the fabric of any economy or any city or any town. And the health aspects and the mobility aspects are linked. And then lastly, at 5 p.m., so you have a little break if you're going to join all three sessions. At 5 p.m., we'll have another discussion, designing public transport and spaces for vulnerable groups. And this really is a good one as well. Of course, they're all great. But it's the idea here, how do we design for vulnerable groups? And this is very important because, of course, we have people in every society, young or elderly, but also, people with disabilities, and how are we making sure that they are also part of the infrastructure of the city? I mean, Nigeria has a huge youth population, and how are we engaging young people, especially and vulnerable groups, in designing a better public transport system. And so I will now hand over to the moderator for today, which is Mrs. Temitope George. She is a British trained barrister of Gray's Inn and a legal practitioner of the Supreme Court of Nigeria, with over 2 decades of experience up to management level in the private and public sector. She consults as a PPP transaction advisor and recently as a program coordinator on a World Bank AFDB funded project on the renewable energy space. She's passionate about soft skills training at the workplace and is an author of a book titled 10 Hacks for Working in Niger, which earned her a productivity award in the Lagos state government. And I didn't know this about her, so I'm so excited about this as well, that she's written a book. And also, which of course, why we have her on this panel, she's an avid cyclist and serves as a captain of Psychology Cycling Club. And since meeting her, she has become a very good friend of myself, but also of Ludi. And she has really kind of partnered with, the organization Psychology has partnered with us on a variety of different projects, and we're so happy to have her chair the panel today. So I'm going to hand over to you, and I will be quiet.
Good morning, and thank you for that very warm welcome, Olamide, and well done for all you do at Ludi. We're happy to partner with you. I'm so excited about this session, and particularly the topic after the NMT policy, because psychology has been part of this for quite a while. I'm glad to see that my predecessor, the former captain of psychology, Tunde Laoye, is also on the call. And I know that he also worked actively with Ludi on trying to push this NMT policy. But to tell you a little bit about psychology before I delve into the NMT policy. Psychology is a club that was started by 7 friends in 2011, 7 friends who shared a common passion for cycling. In 2012, they decided to register it as an entity, a non-governmental organization, incorporated trustees with the Corporate Affairs Commission. So psychology has been around for quite a while. I'm happy to say that I joined in 2013. So I've been with psychology for about 10 years too. So psychology, their vision, the vision of psychology is to create a global platform for cycling. And the mission is using the bicycle as a tool to promote healthy lifestyles and social impact. So we're not just about cycling and having fun around the streets of Lagos, but we're very, very heavy on social impact. I'm also happy to say that we're the cycling community and club of choice for expatriates. When a lot of expatriates come to Nigeria and they want to fight, they're eager to find something to do. A lot of them usually, have passed through psychology. So at some point, we've had membership from about 22 countries, and right now, from seven members, we've grown to well over 200 strong members. Um, Social impact is very important to us as a club, and thankfully the Lagos state government noticed that, and that's why we were invited by Lamata to give our input in the non-motorized transport policy. Non-motorized transport policy is something that we're very excited about, and I'm so happy that Mr. Shitabe is one of the panelists here so that he can tell us where we are with this non-motorized transport policy. Because like Olamide said, we've been talking about this since 2018. We gave input into the draft policy. The policy essentially is to make Lagos Lagos is it's a multimodal transport mega city. So apart from improving other forms of transport, it's also about including walkability, cycling safely. Recently, a former minister said, with the removal of the fuel subsidy, a former minister said, oh, we should all be riding to work. And there have been quite a number of discussions around that. But the thing is, how do we ride to work? So psychology is a recreational club, right? So we cycle for fun. But if people want to cycle to work, there's certain things that need to be put in place. And it's very, apart from this, with this non-motorized transport policy, there needs to be infrastructure, supporting infrastructure as well. So I'm really, really eager to hear what the panelists have to say about it. I'm going to invite the very first panelist to answer. To the very first panelist, Mr. Obafemi Shitabe. At this point, I'm going to invite you. I don't want to do all the talking because I'll be asking you a number of questions, but I'd like to invite you to tell us a little bit about the work you have done, how you've been involved in the NMT policy, and where we are. Where are we with this NMT policy? Mr. Shitabe, over to you, please.
Good morning. Can you hear me?
Yes, we can.
And Mr. Shitabe, we can't hear you anymore. Yeah.
Sorry. Can you hear me now? Can you hear me?
Yes, we can hear you. We can hear you.
Can you hear me now?
Yes, we can hear you, Mr. Shitabe.
Okay. I don't know why I'm struggling. Yes. So you didn't hear anything I said. I said apologies for joining in late this morning. Thank you for inviting me to the committee. Regarding the present state of the policy, I'm not sure whether you're all aware. Let me just say this again. The policy was actually approved by Governor Sanwo-Olu in 2019. It took a few years. We couldn't get the approval done under former Governor Ambode, but eventually, I think the governor has some passion for it.
Mr. Shitabe, can you hear me?
Hello?
Okay, we can hear you now.
Can you hear me?
Now we can. Now we can hear you.
I think the network is playing here. I'll start again. Because if you can't hear me, let me know on time. I said the policy was approved by the governor in 2019, in September 2020. And with that, we were able to set up 2 NMT committees, which were enshrined in the policy. A statewide committee of key stakeholders, and then the subcommittee of technical stakeholders, which included the key MDAs and other private sector NGOs like Psychology Riding Club and others. And I think we've had about 2 or 3 meetings about this to chart a way forward on how we will develop a continuous network of cycle lanes and sidewalks. I hope you can hear me. Hello?
Yes, we can. Yes, we can.
Oh,
Mr.
good.
Shito.
Very good. I just
Go
wanted
ahead.
to make
We
sure.
can hear you.
So, so the policy has been signed. It's a question of implementation now, how we will develop the infrastructure for NMT. As you well know, we had a pilot sidewalk project in Lagos, which we've done, I would say halfway from St. Nicholas to about King's College, but we intend to take it from King's College all the way to the entrance of the CBS so that people can have pedestrian access to the BRT facilities and other bus facilities at the TBS. Following that, the committee has had a couple of site visits to look at. We're looking at piloting NMT infrastructure in Lagos Island and Etiosa local government. By that I mean using the 20 local government structure. I think the president of Cycling Club was part of one of the site visits we attended, if you recollect, and we've been able to do some preliminary sort of mapping. I'll just say preliminary. Something between Lekki Phase 1 that will link Ikoyi and come back to Falomo. But going forward, I must say this, I don't think you remember we entered a Bloomberg competition. Unfortunately, we didn't succeed in it. And I walked up to the MD and I said, look, there's only one reason why we didn't succeed in it. Charity must begin at home. We must be seen to do things ourselves before other people can help us. And if you look at the long list of the people of the countries, the cities that won it, you will see that they already have significant NMT infrastructure that has been developed. I mean, in Africa, I think Addis Ababa, I think Nairobi was selected. They've gone far ahead of us, and we've not done so much. We've started something, but we need to do more and not rely on anybody else to help us. And even if they're helping us, they're only going to augment what we're doing. So she agreed with me. So we've not had another NMT meeting for us to continue the discussions. Now, we should have had an NMT, we should be having one before the end. We should have one meeting before the end of the year, in the last quarter of the year. But the issue that we have right now is that we haven't had that site visit. We decided also, because of the Bloomberg initiative, to extend that thing to link those 2 local governments. That is Lagos Island and Etiosa. So it's not just where we stopped at our site visits. We're taking it to link up the, let me put it this way, the Falomo Shopping Center, the ShopRite in VI. I'm talking about now landmarks that we need to link up. The Obalende bus terminal, and most important is the Marina interchange. You can see we've just opened the rail station there. And the MBA and I were even discussing that because of all this rising cost of fuel, that maybe people will encourage. There's always an opportunity for certain things happening. Maybe people will be more encouraged to cycle, even within Lagos Island, especially with the interchange in Marina right now, which is still undergoing development. Obviously, we have a rail station there, but the other things have to be put together so that there can be proper integration. But I must, unfortunately, I must announce to this panel today that we, like I said, we're going to do two things we wanted to do. We wanted to finish the sidewalk project in CMS, Tafawa Balewa, take it to, and then do the mapping, the proper mapping, network mapping between these two local governments, so that from next year, we can start to implement. But as I speak, unfortunately, we don't have enough funds to even do the mapping again this year. It is really unfortunate, but we are trying to look for other sources where we can get the funding to do that. But I can assure the panel that beginning early 2024, we will start to develop this NMT links between these two local governments. But first, we have to get the mapping right. So that is the current state of things at the moment. I don't know whether you have other further questions to ask. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Mr. Shitobe. A little sad to hear about the fact that we didn't qualify for the Bloomberg grant, but also excited about the rail project, the Blue Line, the opening of the Blue Line. I was pleased when you were talking about cycling around Lagos Island. One of the things about that we've discussed about on the NMT policy, apart from there being road signs, it's just different ministries within government sort of interacting with each other, particularly Ministry of Works and Infrastructure. So, for example, when you talk about people cycling to the rail line, I'm thinking of Ahmadu Bello, and I'm thinking of the speed bumps on Ahmadu Bello, which which poses quite a hazard for cyclists. And these are not for recreational cyclists and even commuter cyclists. So it's important that there's communication and interaction amongst the various MDAs. And that's one of the things that was identified in the NMT policy, that over a period of time, there'll be over 15 years. It says what you have there is about 15 years. And for the next 15 years, so that's 15 years from 2020, there'll be bicycle lanes. Some of these things will be taken in consideration. Things like speed bumps, making sure that the speed bump, the width of the speed bumps leaves a little room for the cyclist on the road, a commuter cyclist, to be able to commute. Those are things that I know that Lamata has in the works. We do understand that budget is a constraint, but we can work with what we have, particularly leveraging the partnerships that we have with different organizations like Psychology, LUDI, ACF, and ITP. At this point, I'm going to ask Chris from ITP a question. So for him to tell us about his experience with other cities in Africa. So from your experience, Chris, with other cities in Africa, can you share ideas on how Lagos can move from policy formulation? As you know, we do have this policy, but how do we move from formulation to implementation? You're welcome, Chris.
Sure, thanks so much. It's great to be with everyone this morning. And that's a critical transition we need to make. It took many years to get the NMT policy adopted, and we're really happy that it's there in force now. But it's really critical that we move toward implementation and really scaling up the excellent NMT initiatives that Lamata has been taking so far. Lagos is making huge investments in public transport with the Blue Line and Red Line under construction. And it's really important that we build good last mile access to these corridors, because that'll help boost ridership on these systems. And so that means having excellent walking and cycling facilities within the catchment area of every single station, having secure bicycle parking inside all the station buildings on both rail lines. And then looking at how these catchment areas can connect to the wider walking and cycling networks in the city. And what's been really critical in many cities across the region is having very good alignment across government, making sure that all agencies are pursuing this vision of improving the walking and cycling environment, making active mobility comfortable and convenient, so that it's not just a mode that people use because they're forced to, because they don't have money, but they actually enjoy moving around the city that way. And I think in the case of Lagos, it's very important for Lamata and the Ministry of Works and Infrastructure to be aligned, because we don't need to limit ourselves to these specific walking and cycling pilot projects. You know, any new road that the Ministry of Works is upgrading can be an opportunity to develop world-class walking and cycling infrastructure. So we need to make sure that we're following good street design standards when we're building all those projects, you know, so we're not just building lots of lanes for cars, but we're really thinking about all the modes and making sure that those streets are people friendly. Now, when we were doing some work in Lagos, one of the things we noticed was that there was a lot of focus on very high speed corridors, you know, where we're prioritizing vehicles, we're forcing everyone, all the pedestrians and cyclists, to go up on footbridges, which is really inconvenient. You know, footbridges are not pedestrian infrastructure, they're car infrastructure, often, you know, framed under the guise of improving things for pedestrians, but they don't. Like, the only purpose of them is to speed up cars. And on streets that are in the core of the urban area, the focus needs to be on mobility of people. And we achieve that by prioritizing public transport, so having dedicated lanes for buses and BRT, and then having good NMT. So shifting from, you know, from that mindset of designing urban highways to having complete streets that are welcoming to everyone. We also need to think about the gender dimensions of this problem, because our experience in many cities across the region is that women are much more likely to walk and use public transport. And so when we design the mobility system for cars, that's a very biased approach. You know, we're helping a certain segment of the population, but not everyone. And we need to make sure that these guidelines for street design are enshrined in the official regulations at the state and national level. So I think it's critical that we work toward that. You know, we're seeing more and more countries in the region adopt progressive street design standards. So we've been working in Ethiopia, where the Ministry of Transport and Logistics is poised to adopt a new urban street design manual. And it'd be great to see the same in Lagos and Nigeria. So let me leave it at that, but in general, we're really excited about the opportunity and glad to see, you know, everyone coalescing around this agenda in Lagos.
Thank you very much, Chris. Just the takeaways from what you said, you reiterated the importance of alignment amongst ministries, alignment amongst the ministries, departments, and agencies when it comes to this implementing NMT, because there's no point having a policy and Ministry of Works and Infrastructure doesn't, you know, ensure that their designs match that policy. You also mentioned what we have in Lagos, right? What we've seen in Lagos is, and a lot of cities, to be honest, who are yet to who are yet to implement a non-motorized transport policy. There's a tendency to prioritize cars over people. So we need to think about prioritizing public transport and people mobility over cars. What we're used to. So it's something we're used to, and it's something we've done over time. So it involves changing mindsets as well. It involves changing mindsets. On the other day, while I was on the Lekki-Ikoyi Bridge in Lagos, I saw a commuter cyclist riding his bicycle on the pavement, on the pavement, and not on the road. But he was doing that for his own safety. He probably didn't feel safe enough. And I felt like coming out of my car, you know, I was trying to like capture him, and I felt like coming out of the car to say, no, you're meant to be on the road. The road is for you as well. But he felt safer being on the pavement. So these are real issues that we definitely need to tackle. Mr. Shitabe, at this point, I'll ask how is the alignment of the NMT policy with other ministries, departments, and agencies? What efforts are you making to ensure that, you know, that it's well aligned and it's being implemented in their road designs, in their future road designs and ongoing road designs? How is this NMT policy being aligned with their ongoing road designs and future road designs? And how I'd like you to respond to how we can prioritize, how Lamata is working towards prioritizing public transport over cars, and mobility of people and cyclists over cars. Thank you. Mr. Shitabe, over to you, please. Mr. Shitabe, your mic is, yes.
Okay, you can hear me now, right?
Yes, can hear you now.
Oh, yes, good. Thank you very much. The essence of the NMT committees and the subcommittees was to obviously foster inter-agency coordination, because what really happens generally is that the left doesn't know what the right is doing, and that should stop. And that's why we want synergy, and that's why we all sit down in the committees. The Ministry of Works and Infrastructure is a key member of that committee. And it does not please me to say to you right now is that sometimes we just, I have to be brutally honest there. Sometimes we just don't get their full buy-in into some of the things we do. Many instances, I wish one of my engineers were here, where we'll plan this and then Ministry of Works will do something else. I think we must have one more subcommittee meeting in the last quarter of the year to reemphasize these things, these issues, these principles. And we probably will have to get in this time around. Well, one of the directors of the Ministry of Works to come and attend, rather than send any junior officer to come in and all of that, because they are still responsible for maintaining the entire over 3,000, road network in the state. And Lamata just maintains a fraction of that, by a quarter or a fifth of that, which we call the declared road network. I think the focus for the next meeting should be another site visit, this time to cover those two local governments and actually physically identify the alignment, the cycling alignment that we intend to, at least alternative cycling elements that we intend to use. Obviously, there are already barriers in terms of the road infrastructure, which may have to be removed. And so all those things, we're going to have to look at it again to see exactly how we can have that link between Ethiopia and Lagos Island. And then going forward also, it's not just about, okay, this is what we're doing individually. All the projects that Lamata is currently about to implement, NMT has been incorporated into the designs. We are currently implementing what we call the Lagos Strategic Transport Master Plan Project, Phase 1, which is funded or co-funded by the AFD and IFC, where we are developing 8 quality bus corridors and 2 multimodal interchanges. And I can assure you that NMT infrastructure is being, incorporated into the designs of those corridors. We may have problems with cycle lanes because the whole place is already built up. As you can, that's the biggest problem with cycling infrastructure. The fact that everything is built up. But at least we're going to have sidewalks in all these corridors leading to various stations. The QBCs are going to have bus terminals and depots and things like that. But the issue we have, like I said, is with the cycling aspect of it. It's very difficult. We don't have much width on the road to be able to do that. But as much as we can share, yes, we will share that. The whole idea, obviously, is to prioritize walking and cycling. Nobody wants to be, people should not be carrying their cars all over. Even look at the recent opening of the Blue Line Rail. Now, a lot of people would stop carrying their cars from the Festac and the Badagry sector if they want to come to the island. And all this will help to reduce greenhouse gas emissions and things like that. So yes, Lamata is still in the forefront, aggressively pursuing this NMT project. And we sincerely hope that 2024, we can actually start to implement the policy. So straight off my head, we should have that meeting sometime in October or November so that we can sort of set up a blueprint for implementing this cycling and NMT infrastructure next year in Etiosa at Lagos Island. And the Mile 2 interchange, sorry, the Marina interchange would help us to serve as a hub also. Because if you look at it, you're going to need access into that interchange. That's going to be the issue. So I think this site visit might be an all-day site visit when we that we should have, so that we can actually look at it physically to try and solve the problems. Thank you. Thank you.
Thank you very much. It's nice to hear about the strides that Lamata is making. I wasn't happy about but the bicycle lanes, and you know I'm still going to be knocking on your door and putting pressure on you
I know.
to make that happen. What I can say though, for Lamata is that, you know, you've been able to, you've always got the support of the government. You've got the support of the governor, which is what is important for implementation of some of these policies. So we've got strong political will on your side, and with the CSOs that you have on your side, I'm sure that you can still make a case for the bicycle lanes, particularly for areas where the road is wide enough to incorporate bicycle lanes. Another thing I wanted to mention, there's a particular bicycle lane at Wemco, but that's not even being used as a bicycle lane.
Yes, good question. Yes, Wemco Road in Ogba. The reason why is that it's a discontinuous cycle lane. You're going to ride up to a point, and then after that, you're going nowhere. So except you just want to use that stretch for exercise, it has no public transport link at all. That's not what we want. It was, but we should find a way to continue that cycle lane. That's the point. Just ends at the point. Yeah. So yeah, you're right. So those are some of the things we're looking at. In fact, let me put it this way. The initial pre-feasibilities that were done were centered around Lagos Island, Etiosa, CBDs, and Ikeja Central Business District. We've not even gone in there because now we have to find a way to provide same NMT infrastructure that will lead to the Ikeja bus terminal and things like that. People should cycle to Ikeja bus terminal. So that's even from Wemco Road in Ogba. So those are the things that we have to look into. You know. It will be the first thing we're going to look into when we get to Ikeja, definitely. How we're going to link that, put it this way, the Ikeja interchange, because now you have a bus terminal and they're going to also having the red line. There's the red line, Ikeja. There's a station that's been almost finished now in Ikeja for the red line. So you've got rail, you've got bus, all within 1 minute, 2 minutes walking distance. So how we're going to convert NMT infrastructure to get into those hubs is another task that Lamata will have to accomplish as soon as possible. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Shitabe, and thank you for highlighting the importance of linkages between, you know, NMT and other modes of transportation. So there's a question for Chris. So Chris, Mr. Shitabe has mentioned the limited budget for NMT because transport budget goes more towards roads and now trains and BRT. How can we advocate for more budget going towards NMT infrastructure?
You know, we need both public transport and NMT infrastructure. So I don't think we should pit those two against each other. What we really need to look at is the fraction of overall spending that's going toward roads and flyovers and footbridges versus the spending on public transport and active modes. And that's the balance that we need to change so that we have more money going to all of these sustainable modes. You know, in Kenya at the Africa Climate Summit 2 weeks ago, the transport minister announced that the government would be shifting toward having 40% of all spending on urban mobility going toward active modes and public transport. So that's the kind of commitment that we need to see in Lagos as well. Yeah, that we're going to reduce the spending on infrastructure that's only helping a small fraction of the Lagos residents who are using private vehicles and invest in modes that could carry large numbers of people much more efficiently. Because even the NMT policy makes this point that all of the work on walking and cycling needs to happen in a larger context where we're investing in public transport. So that means in addition to the 2 rail lines, we need to improve and expand the BRT project. So, working out the kinks in the operations, getting buses that are compatible with the infrastructure. So essentially they need to have doors on both sides so that they can dock at the median stations, and increasing the bus fleet overall so that there's a large fleet of high quality buses in Lagos. So those things are all stressed in the NMT policy. And then in addition to that, the policy talks about the need to manage the use of private vehicles. So having market-based fees for on-street parking and making sure that parking fees are aligned with demand. So on streets that have higher demand, you have a higher fee, and making sure that the fee is proportional to the time that you actually spend parked on the street. So we need to work on all these fronts to ensure that the overall mobility system is sustainable, and NMT is part of that bigger picture.
Yeah. Can I follow up on that?
Yes, please. Yes, please.
Yes. Mr. Cross does mention something that is very, very important. I think what is probably lacking right now, as much as we get a lot of support from the governor, they still need to work on budget on transportation. Public transportation goes to NMT. I think it's something that maybe I'll have to sit down with the managing director and discuss, that we need to articulate the fact that from the outset, as the policy says so, I think the policy talks of 1%, if I'm correct. Maybe Mr. Croston, I can't remember, but there's a specific percentage. This is 1%, or I can't even remember. Should be how would I call it? Should be ring fenced for non-motorized transport. So it's something that we really need to work on and see how we can accomplish that. Just wanted to mention that. Thank you.
Okay. So quick question for the two of you. Cycling or infrastructure? What should come first? Cyclists or the infrastructure for cyclists?
Yeah, I mean, we definitely need the infrastructure. I think it's great that there are more and more cyclists on the road and different groups promoting cycling, but to really open it up to the large numbers of people who would like to cycle but don't feel comfortable doing so now, that's where the infrastructure comes in. So we really need to see that shift. But one other thing that the NMT policy talks about is the idea of introducing a public bike share system, because this is another way to get more people out on bikes, and you can try out the system without having to make a commitment to buying a cycle. So it's a really neat way to get new users into cycling and to provide a more convenient mode for last mile access to public transport. So having a network of bike share stations across the key city areas would be a big step toward, boosting that cycling culture.
Good. Mr. Shitabe, what comes first, cyclists or infrastructure? I think, well, Christopher, from what you've said and what we have seen in Lagos, what has come first is definitely the cyclists, but we definitely need more infrastructure to boost the situation and encourage more cyclists, particularly commuter cyclists, to cycle to work. On Saturdays, you typically see, like you probably noticed, different clubs, different cyclists cycling all over Lagos, whether it's on the island or on the mainland. You see there are now more groups than ever before. You see a lot of that on Saturday or Sunday in Lagos. But we need more commuters. They've also been more, I know we did, psychology and ACF worked on, they did some enumeration of commuters that take the bicycle, that ride to work. And we had, I think at that time, it was about 50 people or so. The numbers are growing, but to encourage people to ride to work, there needs to be certain things in place. There needs to be, that infrastructure is very important. People need to feel safe to ride on the road as opposed to riding on pavements, then affecting those who want to walk on the pavements and we want to have a more inclusive transport system, inclusive non-motorized transport system. So I would say they both go hand in hand, and they're as critical as the other.
They need to, yeah. And one other part of the infrastructure that I'd mention is we need more trees in the city. That's an aspect that's often overlooked in street design, but having shade on all the streets would really go a long way toward making cycling comfortable, because we have to address the issues around climate and ensure that streets have shade and that they're also more beautiful and inviting to people.
Okay, thank you, Chris. So there's a question here in the Q&A. It's, can multi-use lanes work with cycling here in Lagos? Can multi-use lanes work with cycling here in Lagos?
Generally,
Chris.
Yeah, I'd say generally, I'm assuming we mean multi-use lanes where pedestrians and cyclists are sharing the same space, and that really only works if the volumes of both are very low. Because as soon as you have a lot of pedestrians using the space, then cyclists will just jump into the carriageway because it takes too much effort to try to navigate around the pedestrians, and it slows you down. So I think on any street where the volumes of either pedestrians or cyclists are high, it's important to have dedicated space for cycling. And we need to make sure that the adjacent footpath is wide enough that accommodates the pedestrian volumes that you have on that corridor, so that pedestrians aren't spilling into the cycle track. So it really requires looking at all these things together and not just designing the cycle facility in isolation. We also have to have really good walkways so that the two work together as a unit.
Thank you, Chris. Mr. Shitabe, are you still with us? Mr. Shitabe?
Can you hear me?
Yes, can hear you now. Can hear you
okay.
now.
Yes, obviously the task the government has that the government has is to create the enabling physical environment. Because the enabling physical environment is not there, which is providing safe infrastructure, then it's going to be very difficult for cyclists or even pedestrians to use our roads. So, and that is the biggest task that we have right now. How do we create safe roads for pedestrians and cyclists? Thank you.
Mr. Shitabe, what are your final thoughts? I'd like you to give your final thoughts on the topic. What next? What next? Critical thing.
Well,
you mentioned budgets, but
yes,
let's end on a high note.
Like I said, we need to really set about delivering this infrastructure early next year. So this last quarter of the year, like I said, we must have that meeting and plan for that and make sure all the key stakeholders, including the Ministry of Water and Infrastructure, are present so we can go out there physically and look at the situation between these two local governments and come up with a design, that we're going to be proud of, that we can implement next year, given all the constraints that are involved. Also, we'll make sure the Lagos State, I don't know whether you're aware, we will have a new Lagos State Parking Authority, which is also a part of the Ministry of Transport. They will be there also, because their inputs are going to be required as to how cars can park safely and things like that. There's one or two things that they're doing right now that I'm not particularly happy about, but we can discuss all this at the committee level. And that's why that committee is so important, so that we can all be on one page. Without that committee, we wouldn't have that cooperation, that coordination to push things forward. So for me, the next phase now is to have the NMT subcommittee meeting sometime in October or November, so we can set the agenda for early next year. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Shitabe. Before I invite Chris to give his own final thoughts. There's a couple of questions. There's a question in the chat box, which I'm going to quickly ask any of you, one of you, either of you to address. How do we, it seems the gap between NMT policy formulation and implementation is the lack of political will. I believe lack of funds, which I think is because of lack of political, shouldn't be an excuse. There could be creative ways to further mainstream or push the interests or principles of NMT in the city apart from just building infrastructure. Well, that's a good point, and it has been addressed, and like they said, it's something that will be addressed at the committee level. That will be addressed at the committee level. This other comment, I was in Amsterdam recently and the cyclists were so aggressive. My kids, this is Olamide, her kids nearly got run over. I know the Amsterdam experience. How do we promote the hierarchy of the road? Vulnerable people, pedestrians, cyclists, motorized transport. How do we promote the hierarchy of the road? Because in Amsterdam, the other problem is that, cyclists are aggressive and you can get run over by cyclists. So how do we promote the hierarchy of the road? Vulnerable people, pedestrians, cyclists, motorized transport? That's Olamide's question. We'd also like, if you have any questions, for those some of our attendees, please raise your hand and we'll unmute the mic. Chris, do you want to quickly take Olamide's question before we take a question from the audience?
Sure, yeah. Yeah, I've heard that about Amsterdam. I think it's important that we always ensure that pedestrians have the right of way. They need to have priority on our streets, and whether that means cyclists or vehicles respecting their right of way, we need to make sure that they get priority. But I think there needs to be clear messaging also for the vehicles that they need to stop for pedestrians and cyclists. And that's been missing from a lot of the driving training that we do. And we need to make sure that we mainstream that idea that pedestrians have the right of way.
Thank you. We have a question. Pedestrians have the right of way. So pedestrians are very important in terms of hierarchy. Wale Alade has a question. Can we unmute him to ask his question?
Hello.
Go ahead.
Okay, thank you so much. It's been an interesting conversation here, and I think that Mr. Shitabe and Chris have done justice to what the issues are. So mine is not question per se, it is contributions, right? And my contributions are in the following areas. Now, there is no better time to implement the Lagos NMT policy than now, given the fact that government has removed subsidy on fuel, public transport has become more expensive, using your private vehicle has become more expensive, so there is no better time. But then, I think the issues are related to strong political will. Christopher mentioned that every new project is an opportunity to implement the NMT policy. And so I totally agree with him, because if the political will is there, it is a matter of engaging with the consultants or the engineers who are designing the road to ensure that they implement, they take into cognizance the NMT content, right? For example, when the BRT was introduced, there was no BRT plan for Lagos, okay, until the strategic master plan came in. And so all existing roads where we have BRT lanes now were forced to have BRT grafted on them. So if we have political will, we can actually graft NMT infrastructure on all the road networks that we have. Then I think that in demonstrating political will too, the government needs to connect the projects arising from the NMT policy to budget. If you do not connect the project arising from the NMT policy into the annual budget, then all the plans will be left unattended to. So these are the issues, right? And in addition, I think institutional capacity is also a challenge in the implementation of the policy. For example, the Ministry of Transport is not as professionalized as Lamata, and that's why Lamata is overshadowing the Ministry of Transport on transport issues. So the Ministry of Transport need to be professionalized. There is need for capacity building for the government officials or government staffers to know what it takes to implement the policy. I think funding is also a challenge, right? But then there is a leeway. The public-private partnership model is there, but the challenge is the trust. Okay, the challenge is the trust. Do the private sector trust government enough to come into partnership in funding this infrastructure? And I think the problem of the trust is what made Lagos State to single-handedly fund the light rail transit project, the Blue Line, the red line that is upcoming, single-handedly funded by the government. Why do we not have the private sector coming in to partner with the government to deliver this project? So trust is essential, right? And finally, I think there is need for road user behavior consideration, the public orientation. I heard Mr. Shitabe mentioning that pedestrian infrastructure, cycling infrastructure have already been demonstrated in some areas, but the public is misusing and abusing this infrastructure. Go to all the places he has mentioned, you will see that you will find all these traders selling pepper, selling this and that on pedestrian ways. You know, so there is need for public orientation towards NMT implementation. And then finally, there is need for advocacy. Psychology and other interest groups should engage more with the government. Engaging with government to pressurize government to implement NMT, raising consciousness for the private sector to say, look, it is possible for you to come, trust the government, this is possible, and possibly engage with donor organizations to implement some of these as models. And when people see that this work, or government sees that this work, yes, I think that at the end of the day, this dream may be realized. So thank you very much for having me. Thank you.
I just realized my mic was muted. Thank you very much, Mr. Alade, for all those points. Political will is very important. We've mentioned that. Thank you for reiterating that. Political will can also be demonstrated in budgeting. So if there's strong political will, you know, it should also be demonstrated in the finances that flow towards projects. So that's very important. You mentioned lack of trust with from the private sector in partnering with government for some of this infrastructure, for providing financing. I can speak, I was part of the Blue Line project when it was a PPP, and part of the issue was actually mitigation, risk mitigation, the financing risk mitigation, and other issues around the laws. You know, there was a requirement for whatever concession agreement signed into government to be submitted to the House of Assembly for ratification. So that was part of what sort of stalled the private financing, and where government now decided they were going to undertake the financing themselves. So I would say that the trust issue is something you find a lot of private sector partners that are willing to partner with government. So trust, I don't quite agree that trust is a major deterrent. Sometimes it's just finding the adequate risk mitigation measures that provide sufficient comfort for the private sector. The Lekki Ikoyi Bridge, for example, was a public-private partnership project, which was financed largely by the private sector. So yes, there's a lot of things to learn here. You also mentioned institutional capacity building. So people, so apart from political will, people, and I mentioned this as well when we had sessions before this. people, it's important to change the orientation of people for non-motorized transportation. If there's a bicycle lane, you shouldn't see a trader selling goods on that bicycle lane. So that's something we all need to work on. Mr. Alade said psychology needs to work with government. We already do that, and we work very closely with Mr. Shitabe. We're part of the subcommittees, but we will continue. We can't stop. We'll continue to, put pressure, not so much pressure, but collaborate towards this NMT implementation, because it's really a win-win for all of us, for government and for people and CSOs like ours. Mr. Olatunde Laoye said, with the removal of fuel subsidy, the time is now, and that's honestly, the time couldn't be better. The time is now to fully implement NMT as a palliative measure. Yes, I mentioned that at the beginning as well. It's a good time. It's a good time for it, but it's a very important time to make sure the infrastructure is in place. Mr. Laoye would agree with me. We cycle on the weekend, but I wouldn't cycle to work because I wouldn't feel safe enough to cycle to work. Because weekends when we cycle, we have cars behind us. We have the infrastructure to keep us safe, but we need government infrastructure in place to keep all commuters safe. So now more than ever is a time to really intensify all talks, Mr. Shitabe, all the talks with Lamata, with Ministry of Transport, to ensure that this NMT policy is implemented now. Not really doing as much as we can to implement it now, and not necessarily waiting till 2024. We know we're doing all you can, you're doing all you can, but we encourage you to do more, and we're available here to support you. Final thoughts from the panelists. Our time is spent and we should end now. Thankfully, we don't have any more questions. So I'll just give the floor, I'll yield the floor to Christopher and Mr. Shitabe. 1 minute each to round up on this session. Thank you. Christopher?
Great. Well, yeah, I'd say now's the time to step up the ambition. Let's see much greater financial commitments to implementing NMT and fulfilling the goals of the NMT policy. And let's also complement that with improved public transport so that people can move around the city safely and efficiently. And from our side at ITDP, we're happy to support this process and look forward to further collaboration with the agencies. So thanks for having us today.
Thank you, Christopher. Mr. Shitabe?
Hello, can you hear me?
Yes.
Okay, great. Yes, I totally agree with what Mr. Costa said, but in addition, we're also taking the issue of public advocacy very, very seriously. I mean, moving out of the committees and things like that. We had a sustainable mobility course last year. Remember, it's all part of creating this awareness, and we're going to have another one this November. Creating awareness for zero emissions and things like that. We also have what we call, there's going to be a workshop in the next few weeks. It's called Treat Interchanges for Inclusive Transport. We're making sure that all our bus terminals, all our interchanges incorporate safety in terms of accessibility for the vulnerable groups and things like that. So we will continue to do all we can to make sure that the NMT policy takes off, that the policy is adequately implemented. But we have a hell of a work on our hands, particularly raising the capital, making sure there's budget commitments to the policy. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Shitabe. Thank you, Christopher Cost, for all the insightful engagement. And Olamide, over to you. Thank you so much. We're here to support. Psychology is here to support. And over to you, Olamide. Thank you.
Great. Thank you very much. I think some really insightful comments. And I've just some last thoughts, I guess, before I say thank you to the panelists and of course our fantastic chairperson. So yeah, just a final thoughts. I think some really insightful comments. I think, the point which was made at the beginning and throughout the discussion, it is time to act now, especially when it comes to NMT specifically, because we're having, and this is a global thing, the cost of living is way too high in general. And then when you now think about transportation, you think about fueling your car, it's ridiculous. And then the cost of public transport will also go up because, of course, they're using fuel, they're using petrol to fuel the cars, and of course diesel is very expensive anyway. So we have to start thinking creatively and innovatively, and we have to start, I think someone mentioned about political will and pushing budgetary amounts to the NMT infrastructure, and we have to stop seeing, and again, I think someone mentioned about change of mindset. We have to stop seeing the status quo as the status quo and seeing that there can be an alternative. And this is not just for government officials. This is for even people who are walking and cycling at the moment, and so that we can now push the boundaries of what is possible. So I think I'd like to end on that and just thank the panelists, Mr. Shitabe, Mr. Chris Koss. Thank you so much for joining us today. It's been fantastic to have both your insights and your input, and I just hope that we can move forward away from move faster, sorry, and speed up the process, especially as I said, the time is right. And then, of course, thank you so much to our chairperson, Mrs. Temitope George. We really appreciate, as I mentioned before, your support and your continued partnership in the work that we are doing. And just to mention also Psychology's campaign on Share the Road, I think it's very important because it also goes to my comment about cyclists. They also have to understand their role as cyclists, and then obviously the variety of other people who are sharing the road. So thank you so much, everybody. And of course, we have another discussion at 12 o'clock. So please do join in. All the links are on our Instagram page. And of course, if you have any questions or comments, please do reach out to us. All our social media handles are at ludi_org. So thanks very much and have a great morning.
Thanks.
Thank you. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.